Hello and welcome to all the men and women of the West. I'm Joe here from East McCullough Stan.
Hello and greetings.
And that was our intro in ludicrous speed mode. Pretty good, right? Anyways, now we're going to just jump on into the topic you all tuned in for. That is to say, the Kull the Conqueror Riddle of Steel analysis video. This is a scene that I really do like in this movie, where we see the corpses of Borna's sons, those whom he out to love the most in the entire world, and he has slaughtered them. It's a horrific scene, and I know it's a quick one, but since I first watched this in adulthood, because I saw this as a kid and I didn't pay much attention. I really liked this movie as a kid because I just thought it was cool. But
I liked it because Kevin Sorbo.
That's why I said it was cool. But then as a teen, of course, you go through a phase where you're like, well, I have to listen to what the crowd's telling me. It's not cool anymore. It was terrible. Then you rewatch it as an adult and you go, yeah, 6-year-old me was a genius. But the scene itself, I remember just staring and being a little shocked. And as an adult, I was even more horrified because the idea of legacy and heritage and what you leave behind is even more important to you when you become a grown man or a grown woman in the case of the ladies. And so for me, I tend to think of a father as a positive figure, and it's one of the most important duties a man can take on to himself. And just as being a mother is probably the most important one for women. So these are the role of parent is the most important one in the universe. And for Borna to just slaughter what seems to be almost a half a dozen to a dozen kids, and most of them don't look like they were very old. It's horrifying.
For some of his position to commit filicide, there's a reason why when the soldiers come to report, it's like
they just stare. And even the main villain the general is horrified. And he's frozen in place and doesn't know how to react to this guy. All he does is just basically gape like a buffoon and just stares. And tries to tell even he basically says, but Your Majesty, what are you doing? So that even the bad guy is basically going. Now, by the end of the movie, Taligaro is even more corrupted. But at the beginning, he at least understands the concept of heritage and sons and taking care of them. But Borna's weird descent into madness is frightening here. And it's something that I really wish had been brought into the comics of Kull, the miniseries. I really loved the miniseries by Dark Horse. And it's one of the best comic book or graphic novel adaptations I've ever seen for the most part. And I did enjoy the fact that politically Kull had to tie himself to Borna's dynasty by marrying Igraine, the eldest daughter of Borna. But the problem is, I wonder when it comes to the comic book run, where are the sons? And I really think that what should have been included was at least a flashback or a reference to how Borna slew his own sons. And this is just, in my opinion, one of the truly most horrifying scenes in all cinematic history. And I understand people will say, well, there's the shape, there's whatever scene in this horror movie or that horror movie. But the thing about this Kull the Conqueror movie is it's not really a horror movie per se, but there's almost nothing more horrifying than a father and a king who's the most archetypal father you can have, slaughtering his own sons. It just defies comprehension. And I know I keep going on and on, but it's just This is a scene in this movie I absolutely love. I love the scene, but I also find it horrifying. And to try to understand Borna's mind, in his head, he believes that everybody has conspired against him, especially his sons. Now, from what I can discern, and from what the movie reveals, is that most of the courtiers are scheming against Borna. And looking at the Kull stories, most courtiers are scheming against the king. The problem is that Borna has kind of projected this belief onto his sons. Now, I really wish they had brought in the lizard men into the movie so that we could have this other threat alongside the villainous. But the trouble is, like, maybe they could have revived her instead. But the fact that she didn't do it, the Snake Men didn't revive her, I kind of dislike that. I would have liked it had the Snake Men revived her, and we have the two plots connected to each other. But that's just me. I really do love, however, the choice to have Borna kill his own sons. It is horrifying. And it shows what kind of madness he's descended into. And he believes that they were all conspiring against him. Now, an eldest son of age, that might be a possibility, but it looks like each of the sons are children. So he believed that as he had had sons, they had begun to scheme against him. Now, in the Kull novel, there's this very touching and tragic scene where one of the ladies from the harem ends up throwing herself against Kull in tears and thanking him, saying, "You have avenged my son. That madman slaughtered my son," as she was the mother of one of the sons of Borna. And it's a scene which has Kull just shocked, and you get a sense that, does he sympathize with her? It's a moment that I don't think made it into the movie, but they really should have put it in there. And this woman makes it clear that she would be willing to share the bed with Kull, if only out of gratitude, because she truly loved her son. And I don't think it was about the throne. From what the scene implies, it was more about just she was a mother. And Borna killed that which she loved the most in the world. And Kull avenged her loss. And so here, Kull is the king archetype as well, but he assumed the role of that was the warrior aspect who avenges wrongs done to women and children. And so this lady, the balance, the scales and the balance is kind of restored in a way, but the tragedy is that, could it ever restore life? No. And the implication is that her son wasn't wicked or anything. It was just Borna was a lunatic. But that's the problem with a monarchy. Ultimately, you eventually get a few madmen. It just depends on how insane they go. In the case of Borna, one would have to suspect that given the power of Volusia. Now, the thing is, the more power an Empire Kingdom has, sadly, the more extreme one of the mad rulers will become. And the reason I say the more extreme is because you look at the Roman Empire with Caligula, Nero, Claudius, even Commodus. These guys went pretty extreme. Elgabalus, the Roman emperor who wasn't sure about his gender and who ended up becoming Elgabalus, genuinely was a bloodthirsty maniac and tried to slaughter, at one point, I think his own cousin, and ordered the men to kill that cousin, even though they loved that cousin of his. And they turned on him in a fury. Who could blame them? Now, pharaohs have occasionally danced with madness. You had several Byzantine emperors who were beyond insane, who made Caligula, Nero, even Commodus, and Agabalus look like cupcakes. There, you've got rulers like Andronicus who were just bloodthirsty maniacs. And what this would suggest is that Volusia, very powerful empire. So that means that for a ruler to take it into his head that he should slaughter his own sons, this would mean that Volusia is very, very powerful and that the king is completely divorced from the common reality of his people. As this is what happens when you get an overwhelmingly powerful imperial civilizational state. Or, okay, what I mean is you get a very advanced civilization with a very powerful and wealthy monarchy or oligarchy. You combine them together and you get a bad combination. You get a bad combo. And at some point, you're going to have a madman. Now, in our modern histories, we've seen with certain forms of government, more than 100 million people perish. And we've seen also with the Holocaust, millions perish for no reason. And other than the fact that men like Stalin and Hitler and were just insane and pure evil. But the problem is that when you get that much power, you do become divorced from reality. Not every ruler can be like Taizong, or I think it is, or Augustus, Caesar, or Charlemagne, and maintain their sanity and remain, I guess you could say, still have that ability to go outside and touch grass, so to speak. I think it's the English phrase, and maintain their connection with reality. And that's the thing. We have to bear in mind, given the precedent of history, that although you get kings like Borna, you also get great kings like Kull. Kings who care about their people and who do everything they could to help protect them and to guide them. Because you look at Augustus Caesar, he was a very good ruler for Rome. You look at Trajanus, to an extent, was pretty good. You look at Antoninus Pius, Marcus Aurelius, these were great monarchs who cared about their people. You even look later down the road at Zeno and Leo, and even Justin, they cared about their people. And look how they elevated Constantinople and the Greek Empire. You look at Charlemagne, he truly cared about the Frank, and he elevated them. So the ruler can either elevate or destroy his civilization. And that's always a worry, because just as you got, for example, in World War II, you got Stalin and Hitler coming along. On the flip side, you had Churchill and Charles de Gaulle, who resisted them with everything they had. So oftentimes, just as you'll see evil, you'll also see lots of good rise up. Because tyrants breed tyrant killers.
And for all we know, Borna's age may have ended up being a factor. If he was so old that the possibility of dementia...
Well, he looked like he was in his 50s.
Yeah, but we're talking about rulers. Consanguinity isn't that far off, especially when we're dealing with long-term...
And this is a dynasty, I think, that's supposed to have lasted 1,000 years.
So there's a chance that...
well, it's implied. It's not stated.
So right there's a chance that... And because of that paranoia of everyone going around him, it might have had a serious effect on his mind. That might have caused early onset dementia.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. I think in the actual Kull stories, from the short stories and whatnot, it's implied that Borna did go a little insane, but it was from paranoia about the snake men. And that, in a way, he was a victim, I think, from the snake men. Well, a victim insofar as a man with absolute power can be, who allows it to corrupt him into committing heinous acts. And in the miniseries by Dark Horse, they do a great job showing that side of things, but also showing the flip side that he was an abusive father, he was a terrible man, He was cruel, and he visited the gladiatorial Colosseum a little too often because he liked to see the blood. So he was also a bit of a pervert and a weirdo in the worst possible sense. So Borna, in the novel, or I should say in the short stories, and in the graphic novels and in the comics, is a truly despicable human being. And looking at him in this movie, he truly is despicable. But like I said, I just find it's creepy and freaky what he does. I can't imagine ever wanting to do that to my son or something like. I could not fathom. And I understand, like I understand if your son or child, it might be a serial killer or something, the thought might cross your mind, but even then, I don't think I could ever do what Borna did. And I'm not saying that to elevate myself. It's just, I just find it so appalling and shocking. And I find this is more shocking than, say, Game of Thrones. Because this is a father going after his own sons, lining them up in the palace and just starting to butcher them right there in the middle of the throne room. With nary a thought to, and I love that his subjects are just staring in horror and just blinking, unable to believe their own eyes. And here's the thing. They're all complicit. Because not one of them has the courage to stand up and say, stop. You cannot do this. Taligaro tries, but then immediately crumbles and decides he can't risk his own claims to the throne or his own rank or life. So he backs off when Borna growls at him. So they're all complicit, and they are all undeserving of respect here. Now, 2 is not in the room. I get the sense that he was basically barred from the room. And I also have the sense that 2 did not know what Borna planned to do. And if he had it his way, it's heavily implied in the movie and in the novel. If he had known what was going to happen in the throne room, he would not have allowed it. So, 2, I'm going to give a bit of a pass here. He couldn't have known. Well, he might have suspected that Borna was not in his right frame of mind by this time, but he couldn't have known how far gone Borna was. I don't think 2 foresaw this. Brilliant as he is, I don't think he could have foreseen it. Had Brol been in the movie, I think Brol would have seen it coming, would have been like, yeah, and they call us barbarians. Brol would have seen it coming. Because Brol just has this farsightedness in a lot of ways. And he sees into people. As to Kull, he is the one who steps up and stops Borna from attempting to go after Taligaro. And it's at that moment that Borna sets his gaze upon Kull and decides to kill Kull. Now, in the book, it's revealed that they already know each other from a few feasts, which Borna gave in the palace to the mercenaries, because he was just trying to wine and dine them and play them off against the Black Dragons because he didn't trust Taligaro. Fair enough. And occasionally he was also a little... He liked their company for some reason at times. And Kull, kind of during the feast, got drunk and started manhandling every lady who went near him. In particular, some of the harem girls. Which is actually punishable with... But he ended up, in the end, I think, sleeping with a nobleman's daughter. Which he really shouldn't have. But he was drunk. I think. But it's hinted there's more than one feast, so he slept with more than one girl. So I think that's how it went. It's not exact. I can't remember because it's been a few weeks. And I've been reading a lot of other stuff. But it was a pretty funny couple of passages on those feasts. But at the same time, you got the sense that even Kull kept his distance from Borna, thinking him pretty unstable. Which, yeah. Anyways, what were your thoughts here?
Well, we see here that we've covered just about everything. This entire matter with King Borna was a powder keg waiting to happen.
Yeah.
And
I don't know how else to describe it. It's just...
this probably would have happened far sooner had the Snake Men been involved.
Okay, that's fair. That's a fair criticism.
Because he was getting paranoid of the Snake Men. At least in the books, Borna could say that he suspected everyone of not being who they were. But here, he just went nuts.
Yeah. Can you imagine if they had brought in the Snake Men? Would have still amped up the movie a little. Or a lot. Along with Brawl. Because you need Brawl the Spear Slayer. So, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to smash that like and that subscribe button as though you were Kull taking it down.